The dust clung to Sarah's dress like a second skin, heavy and gritty, as she stepped down from the stagecoach. The heat pressed hard, but not as hard as the eyes watching her from behind cracked shutters and half-open doors. Her fingers clutched the folded letter tighter than she realized until the paper softened under sweat and tension. She looked around the quiet street, lined with buildings that leaned with age, their wooden frames sun-bleached and battered by the wind. This was Gallows Ridge, her new home, her second chance, or so she'd been promised. A man stepped out from a storefront, tall, lean, with a face that looked carved from stone. He wore a hat low, shading sharp eyes that didn't bother with warmth. "You Sarah Cullen?" His voice cut straight, no trace of welcome. She nodded, forcing a smile, straightening despite the weight of the journey pulling on her shoulders. "Yes, Mr. Leary. I'm Sarah." Tom Leary didn't smile. He looked her over, eyes cold as a mountain stream, pausing at her modest suitcase, her plain dress, her tired face. "You come alone?" he asked. "I did," she said, hopeful. "As I wrote you. I've no family to come with me, but I'm ready to work, build a life here." Tom's jaw tightened, his mouth a hard line. "No family?" He stepped closer, voice lowering. "No brothers? No cousins? No one at all?" "No," she said, softer now. "Just me." His breath came sharp through his nose. He looked away, spit in the dust. "That's a problem." Her smile faltered. I don't understand." "You said?" "I said I needed a wife who could stand beside me. Someone with roots. Connections. You've got none." He turned away, hand waving like he was swatting a fly. "I don't need another mouth to feed with no ties, no weight behind her." The letter crumpled in her hand, the words she'd read 100 times now hollow. "But you wrote." Tom spun back, his face colder now, harder. "I wrote for a woman, not a stray. I ain't about to marry someone no one would come looking for if she went missing." He stepped past her, boots kicking dust up into her skirt. "You're on your own." She stood there, heart pounding in her ears, as the townsfolk drifted away, some shaking heads, others just turning their backs. A dog barked somewhere, and the stagecoach creaked as it pulled away, leaving her with nothing but the weight of shame and heat. Her feet moved without thought, down the main street where no one met her eyes. A woman glanced at her from behind a shop counter, then pulled her child closer and shut the door. Sarah's throat tightened. Each step felt heavier, her legs slow, her breath shallow. By the well, she stopped, hand gripping the edge. She lowered her head, the cool iron biting into her palms, grounding her. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not now. A voice, slurred and thick, broke the stillness. "Ain't you the bride they didn't want?" A man staggered from the saloon, bottle in hand, face red with drink. "No family, huh? Means you're no one's problem." He grinned, yellow teeth showing. Sarah turned away, quickening her step, but his boots scuffed the dirt behind her. "Where you runnin', girl? You're free, right? Ain't nobody gonna miss you." She felt his hand snatch at her arm, rough and strong. "Let go!" she snapped, twisting, pulling away. He laughed, grabbing harder. "I said..." A thud. The drunk crumpled to the ground, dust swirling where his head hit. Sarah stumbled back, heart racing, eyes wide. A man stood there, shadow long across the dirt, one hand lowering from where he'd struck. He looked at her, not the drunk, not the town, just her. "You all right?" His voice was low, steady. She nodded, still catching her breath. "Yes. Thank you." He nodded once, eyes narrowing like he was sizing her up, not unkind, just careful. "This town ain't for folks with no one to speak for 'em." Her lip trembled before she could stop it. "I've figured that out." He looked down at the drunk, then back at her. "You got somewhere to go?" She shook her head. "No." "Then you best find a place quick. Nights ain't kind here." She wanted to ask his name, but he turned before she could, walking away with long strides, disappearing around the corner. She stood there, the sun dipping lower, shadows stretching, as the weight of the day bore down again. Later, she sat outside the inn, the door locked after the owner told her there were no rooms left. The town emptied as darkness crept in. A few lights flickered in windows, voices murmured inside, but none for her. Bootsteps. She didn't look up at first, not until the boots stopped near her. The man from before. "Still here?" he asked. She nodded. He sighed, crouching beside her. "This place eats people like you alive. No family. No friends. They see you as nothing but trouble." He glanced around. "I ain't got room for trouble either. But I got a roof. One night." She hesitated. "Why?" He looked her in the eyes, something old and tired behind them. "Because I know what it's like to be thrown away." She followed him, past the edge of town, to a cabin that looked half forgotten. He lit a lamp inside, the dim glow softening the sharp lines of his face. "You got a name?" he asked. "Sarah." He nodded. "Boone." Silence settled between them, heavy but not cruel. "You saved me," she said. He shook his head. "No. Just kept you from getting killed. Don't mean much in this town." She looked around the cabin. Sparse, worn, but clean. "Thank you." Boone poured water into a basin, set it near her. "You can wash. Rest. Tomorrow you figure out your next move. And you?" He sat, eyes on the floor. "I'm just passing through. Like you should be." She didn't sleep much that night. The wind outside whispered things she didn't want to hear. Boone didn't make noise, didn't speak, just sat in a chair, watching the door like he was waiting for something, or someone. Morning came slow, the sky a dull gray. Sarah sat up, wrapping her shawl tight. Boone stood, stretching, eyes still wary. "They'll be looking for you." She frowned. "Why?" "They didn't want me." "They didn't want you then. But folks like them, they change their mind when they see you've got nowhere to run." "What do you mean?" He didn't answer at first, just looked out the window. "You should leave. Now." "And go where?" Boone turned, something hard in his gaze. "Anywhere but here." Her hands clenched. "I'm tired of running. Of being nothing." Boone studied her, then nodded, almost to himself. "Then you better start learning who you're up against." The door creaked open before Boone could knock. The saloon smelled of sweat, smoke, and the sharp bite of old whiskey. Voices murmured low in the corners, eyes flicked toward him then away. His boots echoed over the worn floorboards as he stepped to the bar. "Whiskey," he said, voice flat. The barkeep poured without a word, sliding the glass across. Boone caught it mid-slide, lifted it halfway to his lips, and paused. "You seen a girl?" he asked, eyes fixed on the bar. "New in town. Came off the stage yesterday." The barkeep wiped his hands on a rag that didn't help. "Might've." Boone took a slow sip. "Where is she?" "Gone, I reckon," the barkeep muttered. "Ain't no place for her here." Boone set the glass down, steady. "Not what I asked?" Behind him, a chair scraped loud. A man stood, big, shoulders broad under a stained coat. "You lookin' for the stray?" he asked, stepping closer. "You're too late. She don't belong." Boone didn't turn. "She still breathing?" The man laughed, but it was empty. "Don't matter none." Boone turned now, slow and deliberate, eyes cold. "I think it does." The air shifted, tension curling like smoke. The man hesitated, but only for a breath. Then he lunged. Boone moved faster. A sharp crack echoed as fist met jaw, sending the man sprawling over a table. Chairs fell, men stood, but no one stepped in. Boone stood over him. "Where?" A groan, blood pooling at the corner of the man's mouth. "By the well, last I saw." Boone turned back to the bar, dropped coins on the counter. "She's not your problem anymore." The wind outside slapped at him as he walked. Boone pulled his coat tighter, scanning the street. He didn't expect her to still be there, not after what he'd seen yesterday. But something about her stayed in his mind, like a stone in his boot he couldn't shake. He found her by the edge of town, near the church that hadn't heard a prayer in years. She sat on a fallen log, hands folded tight in her lap, eyes distant. You still here? Boone asked. She looked up, startled, but didn't move. Nowhere else to be. He stepped closer, boots crunching dry earth. Town's set against you. I know. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. Boone crouched, resting elbows on his knees. You should have run. Maybe. She looked away. But I'm tired of running. Boone studied her, then nodded. Come on. She didn't ask where. She just stood, followed. Back at the cabin, she sat by the fire, warming her hands. Boone poured water into a pot, silence filling the space between them. Why help me? She asked finally. Boone didn't answer right away. They're planning something. Her eyes met his. What? I don't know yet. But you being here alone, it fits. She frowned. Fits what? Boone poured 2 cups, handed her one. A pattern. She took it, hands curling around the warmth. You know them? Used to. He leaned against the wall, staring into the flames. I rode with some. Thought we were building something. Turns out, they were just taking. Sarah sipped, watching him. And now? Boone shrugged. Now they're still taking. She set the cup down. I want to stop them. He raised a brow. With what? I don't know, she said, voice tight. But I can't just disappear. Not like the others. Boone's gaze sharpened. What others? She hesitated. I heard them talking, in the saloon. About other women. No family. Like me. Boone cursed under his breath. Damn it! Sarah stood, crossing the room. Tell me. Boone looked at her, something dark in his eyes. They bring in women with no ties. Promise them marriage. Then they vanish. Land gets claimed. Property changes hands. Her breath caught. You're sure? Boone nodded. Saw it before. Thought it stopped. Sarah's voice was a whisper. They tried with me. Boone straightened. They won't try again. She shook her head. They will. He stepped closer. Not while I'm here. She looked up at him, fear and something else flickering in her eyes. You'll fight them? Boone's jaw clenched. If I have to. Sarah's hands curled into fists. Then let's make them pay. Boone stared at her, then nodded slowly. First, we find proof. She nodded. Where? He grabbed his coat. Tom Leary's ranch. He's at the center. Sarah's heart pounded. Let's go. Boone stopped her with a look. No. You stay. If I don't come back, run. She didn't answer, just watched him go. The night was cold, the moon sharp above. Boone moved like a shadow, every step silent. The ranch loomed ahead, dark except for a single light. He slipped through the fence, past the barn, to the house. Inside, voices? Boone crept to the window, listening. He's back, Tom said, voice low and angry. Boone! I saw him. A second voice, sharper. Deal with him. And the girl? Same as the rest. No one'll miss her. Boone's eyes narrowed. He moved to the door, tested the latch. Locked. A creak behind him. Boone turned, knife flashing, but stopped. A boy, no older than 12, eyes wide. You Boone? Boone nodded. They're coming for you. Boone grabbed the boy's arm. Who? Sheriff and his men. They're waiting. Boone released him. Go home. Tell no one. The boy ran. Boone melted into the shadows. By dawn, he was back at the cabin. Sarah sat by the fire, eyes red. They're moving fast, Boone said. Sarah stood. Then we move faster. He nodded. We need something they can't bury. Her mind raced. The church. Records. Marriages, deaths, maybe something's there. Boone considered. Worth a look. They left before the sun rose, the town still asleep. At the church, dust coated every surface, silence thick. Sarah found the ledger, flipping pages. Names, dates, all neat. Then blank spaces. Names crossed out. Here, she whispered. Boone read over her shoulder. The missing. A noise outside. Voices. They're here, Boone said. Sarah's hands tightened on the book. We take it to the town. Boone shook his head. No time. We make a stand. She looked at him, fear and fire in her eyes. Then let's stand. Boone sat at the edge of the cabin porch, his rifle resting across his knees, the early morning light casting long shadows across the dirt. His eyes stayed fixed on the narrow trail leading from town, ears tuned to every creak of the wind through the trees. Sarah hadn't said much since they'd returned from the church. She didn't need to. The names in that ledger spoke louder than any words, names crossed out as if they'd never mattered, never lived. Each one a woman like her, alone, forgotten. Inside, she turned the brittle pages again, running her fingers over the faded ink. Her stomach twisted as she recognized the pattern, each woman arriving under promise, disappearing within weeks. Each entry signed off by men still walking the streets outside, wearing smiles like masks. She looked up, catching Boone's shape through the window, steady, unmoved, as if nothing could touch him. You knew, she said quietly, stepping out to join him. Boone didn't look up. I suspected. Her voice hardened. But you stayed away. I tried. He rubbed his jaw, finally meeting her eyes. Some places don't let you leave. Sarah sat beside him, the silence stretching. You were part of it. He didn't flinch. Not this. Not women. I rode with them for other reasons. Land. Power. Thought I could make something of it. Until I saw the cost. And now? Her voice wasn't angry. Just tired. Boone shifted, set the rifle aside. Now I see what's left. The men who built this town, they don't care who they break. Long as it keeps them on top. Sarah looked down at her hands, dirt under her nails, skin rough from days of fear and running. They broke me already. Boone shook his head. Not yet. She turned eyes sharp. Then what do we do? We can't run. They'll come. They will. Boone stood, stretched. But they expect fear. They expect you to hide. Her breath caught. You want to fight? He nodded. Not just for you. For all of them. His hand gestured to the ledger. This ends here. Sarah rose, her voice steady. Then we need more than names. We need the truth in the open. Boone's lips twitched, almost a smile. That's what I was thinking. They spent the day moving quiet, watching. Boone led her through old trails, forgotten paths that wound behind the town. He pointed out places, told stories in short bursts. The saloon where deals were made, the store where debts were collected not in money, but in silence. Sarah listened, piecing together a town built on shadows. At dusk, they stood behind the mayor's house, the biggest place in Gallows Ridge. Boone pointed to the cellar door, half hidden behind stacked crates. He keeps records there, Boone said. Land deeds, contracts. Things he can't burn. Sarah glanced around. We break in? No. Boone's eyes narrowed. We draw him out. Night settled deep, the town quiet again. Sarah sat alone in the church, the ledger open in her lap. The door creaked behind her, footsteps slow, deliberate. You don't belong here, Tom Leary said, stepping into the flickering candlelight. Sarah didn't look up. Neither do they, she replied, fingers tracing the names. Tom's mouth twisted. You think you can scare me with that? I think they deserve more than silence. He laughed, stepping closer. You think anyone cares? These people, this town, it lives because of us. You're nothing. Sarah stood, facing him. Then why are you here? Tom's hand twitched near his coat, but a voice stopped him cold. Because he knows he's guilty. Boone emerged from the shadows, rifle in hand, aimed steady. Tom's face paled. You. Me. Boone stepped closer. You made me believe in this place. You made me watch it rot. Tom's hand shot for his gun, but Boone was faster. A single shot rang out, the gun spinning from Tom's hand, his fingers bleeding. "Next one's not a warning," Boone said. Sarah grabbed the ledger, stepping past Tom. "We take this to the town. They'll listen." Tom spat. "They'll hang you first." Boone pushed him aside. "We'll see." They dragged him into the square, Sarah shouting, calling doors to open, lights to flicker on. People emerged, confused, wary. Sarah held the ledger high. "These are the names of women this town forgot. Look at them." The mayor arrived, flanked by the sheriff and 2 men, guns drawn. "What's this nonsense?" the mayor barked. Boone stepped forward. "Proof. Of what you've done. Land stolen. Lives taken." The sheriff laughed. "A ledger? From a dead priest? You expect them to believe that?" Sarah faced the crowd. They knew. They heard the stories. They looked away. But no more. The sheriff raised his gun, but Boone fired first. The shot dropped him to the ground dead. Chaos erupted. The mayor shouted, but his men hesitated, unsure. Boone's rifle stayed level, daring them to move. Sarah's voice cut through. "You followed them out of fear. But fear's a choice." A woman in the crowd stepped forward, then another. Murmurs rose. The mayor's face twisted, rage turning to panic. Boone stepped beside Sarah, eyes scanning. "You can't kill us all," the mayor snarled. "But I can kill you." He drew, but the townsfolk moved. Hands grabbed him, pulling him down, disarming him. The crowd surged, the tide turning. Boone lowered his rifle, breathing hard. Sarah stood tall, the ledger clutched tight. Later, as dawn broke, Boone sat again on the porch, watching the sky lighten. Sarah joined him, quiet. "It's over," she said. Boone shook his head. "Not yet." She looked at him, question in her eyes. "There's always another fight," he said. "But this one's done." She nodded, leaning back. "Thank you." Boone glanced at her. "For what?" "For staying." He didn't answer, just watched the sun rise, a new day stretching before them both. The sky pressed low and heavy, thick with the weight of coming rain, as Boone sat sharpening his knife by the window, eyes scanning the tree line. The air felt wrong, thick like it did before a storm broke, but it wasn't weather he was worried about. Sarah paced the floor behind him, her fingers tight around the ledger, worn edges frayed from handling. She'd read it so many times the names were burned into her mind, each one another reason she couldn't turn back. "They won't let us walk away," she said, voice tight. Boone didn't look up. "They'll come hard." She stopped, watching him. "So we run?" He looked up now, slow, eyes calm but firm. "No. We finish it." Her throat tightened, the fear rising again, but there was something else in her chest, something hot and alive. "How?" Boone set the knife down, stood, pulling his coat from the wall. "We take it to the people. But we don't just show them names. We show them the truth they've been scared to say out loud. They won't believe us. They will when they see what it costs to stay silent." Sarah nodded, holding the ledger tighter. "Then we go now." Boone stepped close, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Stay close. Don't stop." The town was quiet when they reached it, the kind of stillness that came before something broke. Boone led her through the alleys, past shuttered windows and empty porches. The square loomed ahead, and Sarah's heart pounded harder with each step. A voice called out, sharp, cutting the silence. "Stop right there." Sheriff Briggs stepped into view, rifle raised, eyes hard. Behind him, 2 deputies tense. Boone didn't flinch. "We're here to talk." The sheriff spat. "I don't reckon we need to hear anything from you." Sarah stepped forward, voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. "You'll hear this." Briggs raised the rifle higher. "You've caused enough trouble." Boone's hand hovered near his belt. "And you've buried enough truth." Briggs sneered. "Last warning?" A shout broke the standoff. "Let him speak." A crowd was forming, drawn by the noise, faces peering from doorways. Boone's eyes scanned the people, old men, young boys, wives with tired eyes, all of them waiting. Sarah raised the ledger. "These are their names," she said, loud enough to carry. "Women like me. Promised a life. Used. Taken." Murmurs rippled. Briggs' face twisted, but Boone saw it, the flicker of doubt, the crack in the wall. "She's lying!" Briggs shouted. "This is nothing but old paper." Sarah opened the ledger, turned it toward the crowd. "Look! Read them." A woman stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "My sister came here once, didn't stay long." Another voice, rough with age. "I remember Clara. She vanished after her wedding." Briggs turned, snapping. "Get back inside, all of you." But they didn't. More stepped forward. Boone felt the shift, the weight tipping. Briggs turned back, rage boiling. "This town don't need outsiders stirring it up." Boone's voice was quiet, but it cut clean. "This town needs to remember what it's made of." Briggs fired. The shot rang out, Sarah gasped, but Boone had already moved. The bullet missed, hitting the dirt. Boone's hand was faster, his gun flashing once, twice. One deputy fell, the other dropped his weapon, hands raised. Briggs staggered, clutching his arm, blood seeping through his sleeve. Boone stepped forward, gun still raised. "It's done!" The mayor arrived, face pale, eyes darting. "What the hell is this?" Sarah faced him, ledger still open. "Justice." Boone turned to the crowd. "You've all known. Felt it. Now it's time to decide. Keep your heads down, or stand up." The mayor laughed, thin and bitter. "You think they'll follow you? A killer? A stranger?" Boone looked around. "I'm not asking them to follow me. Just to stop following you." Silence. Then a voice. "We're done being scared." The mayor's face strained of color. "You'll regret this." "No," Sarah said. "You will." The crowd surged, not violent, just certain. They moved past Boone, past Sarah, toward the men who'd ruled by fear. Boone lowered his gun, breathing hard. Sarah stepped beside him. "We did it." Boone shook his head. "Not yet." They left the square, walking together back toward the cabin. The road felt different now, lighter somehow, but Boone's steps didn't slow. "They won't stop," he said. "Neither will we," Sarah replied. Boone glanced at her, a flicker of something like pride in his eyes. "You're stronger than you know." She looked ahead, voice quiet. "I had to be." The rain started then, soft at first, then harder. Boone didn't pull his coat tighter, didn't hurry. Sarah matched his pace, the storm washing away the dust, the blood, the fear. At the cabin, Boone stood at the door, looking out into the gray. "They'll send more." Sarah nodded. "Then we'll be ready." Boone smiled, just a little. "You sound like me." "No," she said. "I sound like someone who's done hiding." He turned, stepping inside. "Good." The fire crackled, warm against the chill. Boone sat, gun beside him, knife back in hand. Sarah sat too, ledger still near, but her hands were steady now. Outside, the storm raged, but inside, there was only the quiet strength of those who'd faced it and stood tall. The moon was a sliver of cold steel when Boone eased the cabin door shut behind him, the rifle slung low and silent at his side. He'd been gone 3 hours, scouting trails west of Gallows Ridge, and every mile had carried the same uneasy echo, hooves, many of them, moving in careful rhythm just beyond the ridgelines. Someone was coming, organized, patient, men who didn't mind waiting for darkness to settle thick before they struck. Inside, the glow of the hearth threw slow-moving shadows across rough-hewn walls. Sarah sat at the table, lantern trimmed low, turning pages of the ledger one last time as though a fresh angle might reveal an overlooked truth. She glanced up when the door clicked shut, eyes bright, worried, but steady. Boone shrugged the rifle onto its pegs and let the hush linger. Silence was a language too, one he and Sarah had grown fluent in these last days. Outside, the wind rattled pine boughs, then settled, as if listening for footsteps. Boone crossed the room and poured water from the clay jug, the dipper ringing softly against tin. He drank without haste, felt the cold slide into the hollows of his chest, then set the cup down and met her gaze. "They're close," he said. "How close?" She kept her voice even, though her shoulders stiffened. "2 ridges out. Maybe a dozen riders, maybe more. Hard to say in the dark." She closed the ledger, fingers lingering on the cracked leather. "They waited for the storm to lift so tracks wouldn't wash away. They know what they're doing," he agreed. "That isn't a town posse riding blind. More like hired guns." She drew a slow breath. "Tom Leary won't stop until I'm buried and you're hanging from the gate." Boone's mouth twitched in a humorless half-smile. "Tom's got imagination, I'll give him that." She rose, moving to the window, peering through the wavering glass into black pines shifting under moonlight. "If we hole up, they burn us out." "Likely." He reached into the cupboard, drew out a box of cartridges, and began feeding them into his belt loops. "But they're counting on us sitting still." Sarah stepped away from the window and watched him load shells with the precision of habit. Her voice softened. "Tell me what you need." Boone looked up, studying her the way a navigator studies a horizon before plotting the line that might still carry the ship home. The heat in the hearth snapped, sparks darting upward. "I need their eyes on me, not on you," he said at last. "That buys you room to move." She shook her head. "Splitting up gives them exactly what they want. They want that ledger in ashes and anyone who's read it in the ground," he said. "Long as you're alive, the truth stands. Long as we're alive," she corrected, stepping closer, voice firm. "Everything we've done, we did together." Boone opened his mouth, closed it again. Words felt clumsy next to the certainty in her eyes. He set the cartridge belt on the table, palms flat beside it. "Then we move together," he said. "But we don't fight on their terms." From a shelf beside the door he took a small canvas bag and emptied it onto the table. Oilskin packets, folded wire, 3 sticks of dynamite capped and fused. Sarah's brow lifted, but she reached for the coil of wire, testing its length. "Where did you get these?" "Borrowed them from the mining shack off Taylor Gulch," he replied. "Didn't figure the foreman would miss them till morning, and by then he'll have other worries." She traced the crude wax seal on one dynamite stick. "Blasting powder's unstable when old. Not as unstable as men with fresh rifles," Boone said, and there was the ghost of real humor, quick as a match strike then gone. "We set charges at the narrows below Cartwright Bluff. It's the only real pass on this side. Force 'em single file. And when they find another way? They'll be impatient. Night's thin. Sunrise puts them in open country where townsfolk might ask questions." He rolled the fuse cord between thumb and forefinger. "Impatient men make mistakes." Sarah knelt to unlatch a weather-scarred trunk by the hearth. Out came her travel satchel, worn canvas stitched and restitched since her first journey west. She tipped the ledger inside, then added the small leather purse of cartridges Boone had given her 2 nights earlier. She slung the strap across her chest, buckled it tight against her ribs. Boone watched in silence, then passed her his spare revolver. The moment her fingers closed around the grip, he laid his hand over hers, just for a heartbeat. "Shoot only if you must," he said quietly. "I know." She glanced toward the door. "And when the shooting starts? You keep low, count to 30, then head for the brush on the south slope. Stay there till you hear me whistle, 3 notes short. And if I don't? Then you keep walking east till you reach the river road and find someone who'll listen." He gave a faint shrug. "But you'll hear me." Their eyes held. Outside, the wind shifted again, carrying the distant clink of bridles, soft, metallic, unmistakable. Boone extinguished the lantern, grabbed the dynamite and wire, and they slipped into the night. Clouds drifted over the moon, plunging the woods into a darkness that felt almost solid. They moved in single file, Boone leading, Sarah close enough to catch the back swing of his coat. Branches snapped under passing boots far off to their right. The riders were spreading in a slow arc, herding prey toward the cabin that was now empty. At the narrows, Moonlight poured like water between two sandstone shoulders, pale and cold. Boone crouched beside a fallen stump and set the charges, one wrapped in oilskin beneath a shelf of rock, the next wedged in a knot of roots, the last halfway up a cedar whose trunk leaned over the pass. Sarah knelt beside him, feeding wire through brush, hands steady despite the chill sinking through her gloves. Boone twisted fuse into the wire, struck a kitchen match against his boot heel, spark, flare, quick hiss as flame licked the first fuse. They withdrew into deep brush above the trail, flattened against earth that smelled of pine rot and frost. The breeze shifted, carrying voices now, men joking in low tones, the creak of saddle leather punctuating every slow step. Boone's hand found Sarah's and squeezed once. She gripped back, eyes on the trail below. Horses appeared, ghost pale under slivered moon, riders hunched in shadowy silhouettes. 10? 12? Difficult to count in the half-dark. She picked out Tom Leary by his posture, rigid, arrogant, at the column's center. Beside him rode a man with a lantern hooked to his saddle horn, the flicker throwing quick masks of light across their faces. Boone waited, breath shallow. The first horse crossed the shallow gully where the cedar leaned overhead. He thumbed the striker on the wire clutched in his fist. The blast shattered the stillness, a brutal orange bloom that cracked the night wide open. Rock and dirt erupted, horses screamed, shadows flailed. The cedar crashed onto the trail, a wall of splintered wood and thrashing limbs. Men cursed, some firing blindly into the dark. Boone yanked Sarah up and they scrambled across the ridge, staying above the chaos. A second blast roared, throwing dust and sparks. Boone glimpsed a rider pitched from the saddle, lantern shattering on stone, oil spilling fire across dry weeds. Shadows lurched back, voices rose in confusion and fear. Boone led Sarah downslope, cutting behind boulders slick with moss. The plan was simple: sow panic, scatter them, pick lines they wouldn't expect. But he misjudged Leary's desperation. Amid the clamor, a single shot cracked, clean and focused. Boone felt bark spit off a pine beside his head. Another slug whined past his shoulder. Leary's figure stood clear in the firelit dust, revolver braced in both hands, eyes burning. Boone shoved Sarah toward deeper brush. "Go!" She hesitated only an instant, then sprinted low, disappearing behind a fold of earth. Boone pivoted, fired twice, forcing Leary to duck behind a panicked horse, and bolted along the ridge. Down ravine, stray gunfire stuttered as riders dragged wounded comrades clear of the debris. Boone circled wide, trying for higher ground, but Leary dogged him, relentless. Boone's boots slid on loose shale, momentum carrying him into a brief slide, and in that beat Leary gained, panting, coat whipped open to reveal the glint of silver buttons. Boone slipped behind a rock shelf, checking the load in his revolver. 2 rounds left. He drew a breath to steady the tremor in his ribs, then leaned out to sight. The rock face behind him exploded, showering grit. Leary had the angle, advancing slow, eyes narrowed to predatory slits. Boone ducked, gathered his feet. The ridge dropped 10 feet into brush on the far side, a rough landing, but survivable. He exhaled, sprang sideways off the rock, landed hard and rolled, shoulders screaming. He came up crouched, gun raised, but Leary hadn't followed. Instead, the man stalked a deliberate line toward the spot where Boone had last seen Sarah disappear. Boone's stomach turned cold. He pushed off the ground, lungs burning, and tore across uneven earth, branches whipping his face. The brush thinned just enough to reveal Sarah ahead, crouched, revolver lifted toward the noise behind her. Boone shouted a warning, but the word drowned under another crack of gunfire. Sarah fired back, muzzle flashed bright, but Leary kept coming, teeth bared in a grin made monstrous by lantern light behind him. Boone flanked left, closing distance. He fired his last round. The bullet clipped Leary's hat rim, pitching it away. Leary wheeled, saw Boone, and lunged forward, gun at arm's length. Sarah thrust sideways, slamming her shoulder into Leary's arm as he pulled the trigger. The shot went wild. Boone closed, fist crashing into Leary's jaw, bone meeting bone in a sharp pop. Leary reeled, swung, but Boone caught the wrist, twisting until tendons creaked, and wrenched the gun free. The weapon clattered among rocks. Leary snarled, slashed a knife from his belt, but Sarah was faster than desperation. She swung the ledger, that heavy tome of sins, like an iron-bound club. It struck Leary's temple with a meaty crack. He staggered, knife slipping. Boone drove a knee into Leary's ribs, felt something give, then hammered an elbow across the side of the outlaw's neck. Leary crumpled, breath wheezing through clenched teeth. Boone kicked the knife out of reach and dropped atop him, forearm braced across his throat. Leary clawed at Boone's sleeve, eyes wide, life leaking away on ragged breaths smelling of whiskey and fear. Sarah's voice, low, urgent. "Stop! He stands trial." Boone's pulse roared, but her hand closed around his shoulder, grounding him. After a long moment he eased the pressure, hauled Leary to his knees. The man coughed blood into the dirt. Farther up the pass the remaining riders were panicked silhouettes against burning brush, some dragging injured men, others fleeing downslope. Boone jerked Leary's arms behind him, lashed them with the length of fuse wire left over in his pocket. Leary hissed but was too winded to resist. Sarah retrieved the dropped revolver and held it steady on Leary as Boone hauled him up. They began the trek back toward town, dawn's first gray seam widening on the horizon behind their shoulders. Every step was a reminder of what still lay ahead, a courthouse that had never tasted justice, a cluster of townsfolk who had woken to gunfire and would meet a new day asking how deep the rot ran. Leary stumbled, cursed, but Boone hauled him upright. Sarah walked a pace ahead, ledger hugged tight to her chest, eyes trained on the road unspooling beneath the slow lighting of dawn. The truth weighed heavy in her arms, but heavier still was the knowledge that, before this day was done, every soul in Gallows Ridge would have to choose, stand in the sun with that truth or crawl back to the shadows forever. Boone glanced back once, toward the ridge now smoldering behind them, and felt the hush after gunfire settle like dust in his lungs. The fight had broken bones and spilled blood, but the storm hadn't finished. It only paused, holding breath, waiting for the moment when the real thunder, cold verdict, public reckoning, would roll across the streets at high noon. Ahead, Gallows Ridge stirred awake, unaware that its old heartbeat was already failing, that another, fiercer, cleaner, was marching shackled into town at the end of Boone Thatcher's rope. The chains bite into Tom Leary's wrists, as Boone yanks him up the wooden courthouse steps. Dawn drapes Gallows Ridge in a pale wash, every house shutter half open, townsfolk blinking at the unlikely procession, blood-spattered outlaw leading bruised land baron, and just behind them, a woman clutching a ledger too heavy for comfort. Iron rings on would echo like church bells, steady and grim. Leary spits red on the planks. "You really think they'll side with trash over money?" Boone doesn't answer. He just drags him forward. The front doors groan open under Sarah's shove, dust ribbons swirling in stale morning air. Inside, the chamber is nothing but benches and a warped desk, never meant for real justice. But today it must serve. A handful of townspeople filter in, curiosity shoving fear aside. Old Mr. Dillard from the feed store leans on his cane. Mrs. Vance rings her apron. 2 ranch hands whisper near the wall. Word travels faster than horses here, and it has brought them all. Sarah sets the ledger on the desk with a thud that stills the whispers. Her voice doesn't need volume. It carries because it is steady. "Your names are in here," she says, sliding a callous finger along the spine. "Not you, maybe, but your daughters, your sisters, the women you saw once and never again. You thought they left. They didn't." Boone shoves Leary into a chair, wire digging deeper as it wraps the man to the post. Leary's eyes flick over the watchers, searching for a familiar ally. None move. Fear, once profitable, has turned to quarantine. No one wants to catch what clings to him. Bootsteps echo. Mayor Holt enters, coat thrown over nightclothes, silver hair askew. He stops at the sight of Leary bound, Boone looming. "What's the meaning of this?" Sarah pushes the ledger toward him. "Read." Holt's hand trembles as he opens to the first page where neat ink entries end in rough slashes. Clara Dillard. Ruth Vance. Names he recognizes. His throat bobs. "Where did you?" "Father Russo kept records." Sarah says. Before he disappeared. Boone's voice cuts in, low. Tom and the sheriff made sure the priest wouldn't talk. Ledger went missing, now it's back. Holt flips pages faster until one stops him cold, an entry under his own signature. Property transfer dated 1 day after a bride's disappearance. Sweat beads at his temple. This proves nothing, he stammers. A brittle laugh cracks from Leary. Proves you're as deep as me. Holt wheels on him, face blanching. Shut up. Leary leans forward against the wire, voice oily. Why should I? You paid for every acre those girls came with. Let me handle the loose ends. Murmurs swell. Mrs. Vance sways where she stands. The ranch hands stare hard at Holt. The air thickens with the first taste of betrayal. Boone lifts his rifle but slams it against the floor once. Silence snaps back. He turns to the people, words measured. You let wolves run things. Maybe you thought it easier that way, maybe you felt powerless. Today you aren't. Dillard hobbles forward, twists the ledger so its text faces the crowd, peers through wire-rimmed glasses. His voice, raspy but clear, drifts out. My Clara never wrote again after she married. They told me she took ill on the trail east. The old man lifts damp eyes. They lied. A hush. Guilt flashes across faces, shared complicity laid bare. Sarah meets each gaze without accusation, only a quiet plea. It ends when you decide it does. Holt edges toward the doorway. Boone sees it, levels the rifle casually. Stay. Holt freezes. Leary shifts, metal creaking. You think killing us fixes things? Town still needs leaders. Not killers, Sarah says, voice steady as the ledger. Not thieves. Steps drum outside. More townsfolk file in, drawn by the rumor of reckoning. Among them, Doc Avery, sleeves rolled, gaze surveying injuries. He points to Boone's dried blood. You're wounded. Boone shakes his head. Later. Doc turns to Leary's swollen jaw. He could bleed inside the skull. Boone's eyes stay flat. He'll live long enough to answer. Doc nods once, backing away as if the diagnosis suffices. Sarah moves behind the desk, flips to a blank sheet, dips rusty pen in ink. Confession, she says to Leary. Write what you did. Every name, every parcel. Then sign. She slides pen and paper toward him. Leary laughs until it breaks into a cough. Not a chance. Boone cocks the rifle. Metallic click ricochets across walls. You owe them the truth, he says. Sarah doesn't watch Leary, she watches the crowd, gauging whether their courage will hold. It wavers, fragile. She lifts the ledger high. This book started it. Your voices finish it. Who speaks first? Mrs. Vance steps forward, fist shaking. Ruth came here bright as spring. Sheriff said cholera took her. Life went on. Her chin quivers. It shouldn't have. A young ranch hand follows. I hauled wagons for Leary once. Saw empty trunks and bloodstains. I kept quiet. Each confession chips at the dam. Words tumble, sightings, rumors, uneasy memories. The room fills with the sound of people reclaiming their voices. Shame mixes with relief. The burden of silence lifts. Leary's smirk falters. Power drains when no one fears you. He glances at Holt, whose shoulders sag under collective glare. Holt fumbles for a handkerchief, wipes sweat. Tom, he whispers. Right. Leary spits again. Boone steps closer, muzzle inches from Leary's forehead. Sarah's hand rises, but Boone doesn't fire. He speaks softly, only Leary can hear. You die either way. Difference is whether the town heals or rots. Leary stares into the dark barrel, sees nothing but his own shaking reflection. His resolve cracks. Knife, he croaks. Sarah slides a penknife across. Wire strains as he grips it, awkward. He carves shaky letters, listing plots, dates, accomplices. Each scratch of nib against paper drags a hiss from his throat. He signs. Boone lifts the rifle away. Sarah spreads the confession beside the ledger so all can see. This is the truth, she says. What you do with it decides who you become next. Dillard straightens, cane tapping. We call Circuit Judge Harper from Dry Creek. Hold these men till he rides in. Murmured agreement swells. Boone pulls Holt's coat, binds his wrists too. Holt offers no fight. Outside, church bells ring, someone, somewhere, tugging a rope untouched for years. The clear notes fall over the town like rain on dry ground. Boone's knees buckle then, adrenaline's loan comes due. Sarah reaches him in 2 steps, pressing a hand over the soaked bandage at his ribs. He keeps upright but the edge of his vision grays. She whispers, "Stay with me." He manages a nod, breath shallow. "Finish it." The crowd forms a corridor. As they carry Leary and Holt toward the holding cells, townsfolk part with solemn faces. No jeers, only the hush of something sacred returning. Outside, full daylight crowns the rooftops. Sarah helps Boone onto the saloon porch, eases him into a chair. Doc Avery follows, sets down his bag. Boone tries to wave him off. Sarah squeezes his hand. "Let him," she says, and Boone allows the bandage to be cut away. Doc mutters about cracked ribs and blood loss, works in silence. Boone keeps his gaze on the street where townspeople stand in small knots, talking low but not whispering anymore. Windows open, a broom sweeps dust from a threshold. Life, cautious yet determined, begins to move. Sarah sits beside Boone, ledger closed on her lap now, confession papers folded inside. She watches the people too. They'll rebuild. Boone's voice comes rough. Without monsters in charge. And with memories of what silence costs. He nods, eyelids heavy. You'll see it through. So will you, she says. He gives a half smile that hitches when the doctor tightens gauze. If I don't, you can claim I had family after all. She squeezes his hand again. You do. Across the square, Dillard and the ranch hands nail a paper to the bulletin board, Leary's confession copied in bold ink. Sunlight catches the fresh parchment. It flutters once, then sits firm against the wood, a worn-out town's first honest pledge. Boone exhales, pain ebbing under laudanum drop. Doc just slipped between his lips. He turns to Sarah, voice a rasp. Storms past. Sarah threads her fingers through his. Rain washed what needed washing. Now we grow something better. Boone's grip slackens but doesn't let go. The morning spreads wider, bright and startlingly quiet, carrying the smell of damp earth and cedar, as though the land itself has taken a deeper breath.